Uniquely.
Uniquely. Uniquely.
Uniquely.
Uniquely. Uniquely.
Uniquely. Uniquely. Uniquely.
Issaquah.
David, Nils, welcome to Uniquely Issaquah. Really appreciate you coming out. We're here to talk about the little red fish, also known as the kokanee. Yeah. First off, tell us about yourselves a little bit. Why are you here? Why is it special? Why is the little kokanee, the little red fish, special? David, why don't you start out?
Sure. My name is David St. John, and I'm an environmental affairs officer for King County in the Department of Natural Resources and Parks. And I've been working on kokanee recovery efforts for almost 2 decades now. And there's a lot of history with the county and in this watershed and around Puget Sound, working on salmon recovery for longer than that, like going back into the late last century. So I started working on kokanee in about 2000, in addition to other salmon, and I've been working on kokanee since then in varying ways and different capacities.
Nils, how'd you get involved with kokanee? You're a filmmaker, right?
Yep, documentary filmmaker and video producer. And yeah, I mean, I moved to this region in 2010 specifically to kind of cover environmental stories and get out into the wilderness. It's something that I've had in me since my early days up in Western Canada, where I grew up. And I through a separate project, learned about the little red fish and just met David, met some of the folks working on recovery, and just realized this was, what I had done for this short video for PBS was just the tip of the iceberg, and we started plans to try to make something bigger about 3 years ago. And I just fell in love with the story around the fish, and when I finally got to see one 2 years after we started the project, it's just a mystical experience to see such a rare fish in the streams here.
Wow, so it took you 2 years to actually lay eyes on kokanee in the wild, so to speak? Yeah,
I'm sure David will elaborate kind of what's been going on with the little red fish the last few years, but, they were just, it's hard to, time something as clunky and slow as a film production with, nature. Mm-hmm. So there was partly that, but there weren't that many fish, coming back the principal season we filmed. So, it was just wondered if we were actually going to see any, and we did.
Yeah, let's talk about that. For people who don't know, what is a kokanee?
Sure.
And then specifically the Lake Sammamish kokanee. What's going on with them?
So kokanee are a salmon that's native to Lake Sammamish and the Pacific Northwest, alongside Chinook and coho and sockeye and chum. They're one of the salmon species that have been here for thousands of years. And our kokanee are native to this watershed. And there's only 2 kokanee populations that are present today that are native to Puget Sound, the Puget Sound region. One is in Lake Sammamish.
Oh, wow.
And one is in Lake Whatcom.
Oh, okay.
And we know that they are unique from other kokanee populations around the Pacific Northwest because we've done the genetic studies of them, and we've compared them to other fish in the other populations in the species, and they are unique among all of their siblings or their other populations of the species. So they're related to sockeye. They call them a landlocked form of sockeye. So if people know what sockeye look like, kokanee are a smaller version of sockeye.
Oh, that was going to be my follow-up question. If they went out to sea, what would they be?
Right, they would be sockeye.
Okay.
By definition, that's what they would be. They're smaller. They don't go out to the ocean, though they could, which is one of the unique things about this population is they're not truly landlocked. They can go out to the ocean anytime they want. They can leave Lake Sammamish if they want to. We don't stop them. There's no way that we would want to do that. As sort of the natural course of things, they can leave if they want to, but they don't. They reside in Lake Sammamish and the streams for their entire life history, which is usually about 3 to 4 years long. So they have a long history in this watershed, probably back, we believe, to when the glaciers receded.
Oh, wow.
So thousands of years. And they historically ranged throughout the Lake Washington watershed, which encompasses Seattle, downtown Seattle, and a lot of that area in Bellevue and Kirkland and Renton, and places like that. So historically, there are records, anecdotal records, going back into the 1800s of the little red fish being in this watershed, in Lake Washington, and streams that flowed into Lake Washington, or flow into Lake Washington today, streams that flow into the Sammamish River, and streams that flow into Lake Sammamish. So they were around in many, many places. There's records, anecdotal records that show them in many places in large numbers.
Wow.
We're going to talk about the film. There's a part that really I thought was a really interesting part of the film that I didn't know was in there until I saw the film. There's Jeff Jensen, who's a professor at UW-Bothell, talks about that history. And there are fish from this population at the Smithsonian.
Oh, wow.
That he's doing genetic studies of to see how they compare to current day kokanee. So they've been here for a long time, for time almost back to time immemorial, as our tribal partners would say.
Are kokanee up north, the kokanee specific landlocked salmon, is that a Northwest thing or is it global? Are there other
Yeah, sockeye, that species, Oncorhynchus nerca is the species name. They're Pacific Northwest, and they have relatives. I don't know this for sure in like detail.
Right.
In other parts around the Pacific Rim. But there are sockeye populations around the Pacific Northwest. Some are quote unquote native, like true. They are where they've always been. Some are introduced through hatchery programs that move eggs around to fish around, and that's
so like kokanee that would be in Lake Chelan, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't know about that one specifically. They might be native. They might be planted. I don't know. I just don't know enough about that one specifically.
Yeah.
But we know ours aren't related to them.
Okay. Yeah. So. Sorry if I'm going to ask a question you don't know the answer
That's okay.
to, but so other kokanee could be related to other types of salmon. So they wouldn't be like a Chinook version.
No, the kokanee would all be related to sockeye.
Oh, they all are. No matter where they are, they are. If they went out to the sea, they'd be sockeye. No matter where they are. Okay. Interesting.
They're more they're more distantly related to other salmon. They're all salmon,
right?
But they're more distantly related to them.
Why a movie? Why did this, what brought this to the level of doing a full-blown documentary on the Lake Sammamish kokanee? Why is it so important? And I open that up to you.
For me...
I want to hear what he says.
Yeah. It's really got all the ingredients of a great film. You have... people who've pretty much dedicated their professional careers, their lives to recovering the species, or teaching people about the time when it was 10,000, 15,000 strong, and then you have changes that are happening with development, with the region changing and growing that affects this fish and these people. You have this beautiful, natural environment that's also a beautiful suburban-urban environment where all these things are taking place. And so it's beautiful. It's got this incredibly interesting species that even people in the region don't know about. And it's got dedicated characters that we could follow for a long period of time. On the ground, doing things to bring this back, and for me, I really love community building through film, and that was something that was happening already that we kind of glommed onto, and we watched kind of this community grow. That really started with the Kokanee work group, but it was a great subject.
I'm glad you brought up the work group. I did want to ask about the work group. How did that start? Is it Lake Sammamish specific, or is it the whole Puget Sound region? Tell us a little bit about the work group, David.
Sure. The work group was formed in 2007 when several elected officials in the watershed, including Ron Sims, who was the Kokanee executive then, and other elected folks from the cities. There was a long history of monitoring of the decline of this population. Going back to the 80s, WDFW was collecting data in the 80s that showed that the population was collapsing, and fish were disappearing, and the numbers were getting smaller and smaller. So there had long been a recognition that something was going on here that was worrisome. And then there were, in 1999, 2000, there were listings under the Endangered Species Act of other species of salmon, like Chinook and steelhead and others, and bull trout. So there was this growing concern that kokanee were in bad shape and other salmon were in bad shape. So that generally there was, oh my gosh, something bad is going on here. We need to get focused. And so our work on kokanee kind of grew out, or in that context of a broader concern about salmon in general, and then in this watershed kokanee specifically. So in 2005, 2006, 2007, there was a greater sense of urgency from that, and we had seen in 2000, 2001, 2002, one of the runs of kokanee in Lake Sammamish basically disappear. Historically, there were 3 different run timings of kokanee going back to their spawning grounds.
Okay.
One was sort of the early run, they called, which was predominantly a run that went up Issaquah Creek.
Okay.
Which probably produced a lot of fish, just given the size of Issaquah Creek and the amount of spawning area that would be accessible there. We saw the last few fish of that run in 2002, I think.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to ask about that, because Issaquah Creek is the big one for the hatchery.
It's the major tributary to the lake that produces most of the water that goes into the lake.
Right.
Its watershed is over half of the contributing area to Lake Sammamish. So we had seen that happen in 2002. We tried to catch the last few of those fish and put them in the hatchery to preserve their genetic lineage, and we failed. Just blew it. So there was people were okay. We're not going to let that happen again. Salmon are going in the tanks all around. We got to do something. So we formed the work group in 2007. I've been coordinating it since 2007, and we had a lot of the core people at the beginning of the effort. I remember those early meetings. I think our first meeting was at the City of Sammamish City Hall. And we've been growing that partnership since then. We've got great partners, very open, collaborative process where we are about solving the problem. I mean, our mission was to figure out what was going wrong, fix it, basically in real simple terms, and sustain this population. I mean, we want to prevent it from going extinct. We want it to be sustaining itself, which means it's going back to the spawning grounds and producing more fish. And this is one of the key things that we have to keep in mind is it's important for people to be able to fish for salmon.
Right.
Our third goal is for people to go back and be able to fish for kokanee on Lake Sammamish. It's a huge motivator for multiple members of our partnership. So ultimately, we have to get there. I mean, we have to create that bond that people have with these fish, these salmon as food. I personally feel like if we don't get there, we are missing something in our overall program if we don't create that opportunity to have that experience again.
Right.
We know historically the indigenous people relied on this population. It was a fundamental factor in their being able to reside on Lake Sammamish year round. They had a food source.
Right.
That is a fundamental. It's part of our 3-part goal statement is to have people able to fish for kokanee on the lake again. So
Nils, when you were making the movie, what kind of connection did you find? Because you were speaking that food and fishing and all these reasons to bring it back. Besides the health of the species itself, how it connects to humans, to us. So when you were making how did you see that connection or that passion when you were out there interviewing and tracking down and making the film? Did you sense that? Did you feel that?
Yeah, absolutely. And initially it was with the indigenous educators here, with the Snoqualmie tribe and others that, really trying to leverage the kokanee as this unique species as a way to, educate the general populace and school children especially as part of this time memorial curriculum to really understand and respect those cycles that have been going on here since time immemorial. But really that connection, it extended to just about everybody that I worked with. There was something and you can see it on people's faces in the film, just not doing this as part of their job description. I mean, the KWG, I don't know if David mentions, is all volunteer. There's no contracts that brings anyone to the table, that they're all there, because it's the right thing to do. And, even folks who weren't part of the KWG, but who were, helping to coordinate some of these restoration events to plant along the creeks, and people who were, standing up in council meetings to talk about things we need to save, that the Kokanee became this symbol of things that we need to be doing anyway, and that any conscientious citizen should be doing in the place where they live. Learn about the history, and, stop behaviors that are affecting the natural state of the area negatively. So that connection was really something that's felt throughout, and in fact a lot of our scenes and timelines have the word connection in them. Like our main animation in the film is called the Kokanee connection animation. It's just this term that we use. So that was really something that was from the start.
And I can see, in a way, so I've worked in Issaquah since '99. And so salmon being an integral part of this community, I can see it almost getting lost because you have the Kokanee plight being lost, because you have all the fish that come back every year. There's a big Salmon Day celebration. Yeah. So all this, it's like, look at all these fish. Right. But the indigenous Kokanee is in dire straits, is it not? Can you talk, David? Can you talk about what's happened recently on the population over the last,
Sure.
Where, because as I understand it, it's dropped extremely over the last several years, right?
Yeah. So I mean, historically, backing into those anecdotal records of the original settlers, and there were naturalists around that were writing down like what they were seeing and how many fish they saw. Anecdotally, Kokanee were probably the most prominent, numerous, abundant salmon in this watershed.
They had the easiest trip.
That's right. They didn't have to go very far.
That's right.
I mean, that's what Jeff Jensen, again, referring back to Jeff. I mean, he's done some looking into that, and they were abundant. They were everywhere. They were here year round. They were a great food source. So there's records like that allude to that, the presence of these fish around. We, as time progressed into the mid-1900s, late 1990s, 1980, 1990, again, those numbers were declining. Fish and Game, Department of Fish and Wildlife folks were noting that they were seeing fewer and fewer of these fish. So it was they didn't. We can go back and look at specific numbers, but tens of thousands of fish historically were coming down to between 5,000 and 10,000. Between 3,000 and 7,000. They're just sort of progressively going down and down. So the absolute abundance of the fish was dropping. We were seeing run timings disappearing. That early run disappeared. The middle run on the that we think was more Sammamish River oriented fish, we think those are gone as well. People periodically see fish that look like kokanee up there. We're not sure if they are kokanee or if they're some form of sockeye, because there's sockeye that are in the watershed too. Right. So much reduced abundance. Two of the three run timings are gone. So over the last couple decades, we have very good data, of people walking streams counting fish. Right. Over the last 2 decades or so, I think it actually goes back to '96. So, 20, almost 25 years. Very good data. So we're able to track that on an annual basis. And so, salmon populations they're not stable. They don't produce the same number of fish every year. Right. They fluctuate, which is natural. That's what happens. What you want them to do is fluctuate around a higher number. What we see is that the average number is dropping, and they're still fluctuating, but they're fluctuating at a lower and lower number. Over the last decade or so, we've seen some good returns.
Okay.
And using the word good is kind of a relative thing. Right. Compared to historic, they're all bad. More in sort of recent times, we've seen higher numbers than and some lower numbers. So there was a good year in the mid, like 2005, 2006. There was a very good year, 12, 13, where we had 18,000 fish.
Oh, wow.
And then 15, 16, which is the brood year, the return year from that 12, 13 run, because it's a 3-year fish.
Oh, okay.
It was about 7,000 fish. So there are some good years in there, but there's also some very, very, very bad years in there. So we around 12, 13, 15, 16, we thought we had kind of reached a place where, the numbers are really low on average, but we had kind of reached a stable point where it wasn't getting a lot worse, and on the average it wasn't dropping as much. But then what we saw in 14, 15, and 16, we saw lake conditions in the summer be almost ubiquitously lethal to kokanee. Like, there was no habitat for them in the summer. And here's what happens in the lake. This happens in Lake Sammamish. Periodically, it's happened probably over many, many years, where the water temperature at the top of the lake will rise. And there's a threshold at 18 degrees Celsius. If it's warmer than that, then they start stressing out. If it gets really warmer than that, then they die if they're trapped in it.
Okay.
So they'll avoid that water. So the top of the lake warms up, but the fish want to go deeper. From the bottom of the lake, what you have happen is that the oxygen levels drop over the summer because biological matter from phytoplankton blooms and algae and inputs into the lake that cause that to be intensified, oxygen level drops.
Oh, so they're pulling the oxygen out.
It uses up the oxygen.
Okay.
The decomposition of organic matter uses up the oxygen. So what you see is that the temperatures are rising from the top down and forcing the fish down. Oxygen levels are dropping from the bottom up.
Oh, so they're just trapped.
And they're trapped.
Yeah.
We call it the squeeze.
Oh.
So that happened in such an extreme level in 14, 15, and 16, where those levels crossed or they were very close to crossing. And if they cross, there's no habitat.
Right.
The fish are stressed out or they're just getting wiped out. So what happens is that they'll get stressed, but it also makes them very susceptible to predators because there's nowhere for them to go to avoid. So
now, are we talking the smaller fish like the fry, or are we talking all?
Yeah, we think it's probably most extreme in effect on the youngest fish because they just have less adaptive capacity.
Right, because the larger fish. Does the larger fish have predators in the lake?
The bigger they get, the harder they are to consume. But we are worried, that there are now new introduced non-native fish that will prey on them.
Oh, okay.
Like pike.
Oh, okay.
And walleye.
Has pike and walleye been located in the lake?
I
didn't know that.
It's a pretty bad thing. So back to the numbers.
Sorry.
Just to wrap that up, the last, 14 and 15, 16 were the bad summer years. So that means that 16, 17, 18, 19 are sort of the years when those fish will start coming back if they live. What we saw in those 3 years was returns ranging from 20 fish, total return, to 120.
Through the whole watershed?
Through the whole watershed.
Oh, my goodness.
20.
Yeah. So when Nils is saying he can't find the fish to see on the camera, that's why, because there just aren't any out there to see.
Wow.
So that's as bad. It's gotten that bad.
Is that the last established count?
We just finished one. No, we count every year. So we just finished the one for this year, and it was 280-ish. We don't have an exact number.
Right.
You never have an exact number, but it's in that sort of 250, 280 range.
But it dropped from several thousand to 20.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And right when we were kind of entering the thick of the documentary.
Yeah.
So
really?
It really was envisioned as a short documentary, 20, 25 minutes, kind of documenting this dedication. And we thought maybe a continuation of rising numbers, perhaps, if we were
like
lucky.
a happy ending type of thing.
Exactly.
Look what we did.
Yeah. And, it's one of those tough moments as a filmmaker, as a producer, where you realize that although this is horrible news for everyone involved, it really lends more depth and gravitas to the story. And, everyone was very encouraging to, we have to document at least the next season. We got to see what happens. And obviously the characters that we had been working with whose livelihood really is to study and educate based on these fish. They, you could just see the resolve. Initially it was depression and then resolve, and then, there's still 20 fish. That's something. Wow. Let's build on that. So it was kind of interesting.
There's definitely a glass half full attitude, and I guess you have to have that, You can't.
Yeah.
But wow, that when
Yeah.
you know, I think this is a good point. Maybe we want to show the trailer. So
Sure. Yeah.
I'm excited. I haven't seen the long one. I've seen the short snippet. So you brought the trailer for Spawning
Yes.
Grounds. So we're going to take a moment right now.
In somebody else's worldview, this is the Garden of Eden. The land, all of the animals, the creeks, all of those sacred cycles are gifts. They need to be taken care of. The Kokanee are that unique kind of gift.
The Lake Sammamish Kokanee salmon spend their entire life in a lake system.
They enabled our ancestors to live here year-round because there was that food source. They're very important to our people.
Five years ago, more than 18,000 Kokanee adults were counted in these tributaries. This past year, we counted 20.
They've evolved to spawn in these small creeks, which is completely different than almost all the other Pacific salmon populations. So whatever goes on in this lake and watershed, it's our doing.
People continue to keep moving here. They keep building in very, very sensitive places.
Amazon is building, Google is building. The residents of this town have lost out on the economic boom that's been taking place in every other city.
If you move to a place, then you need to learn about the place and its history.
Welcome to my homeland, to my people's homeland.
It's vital right now to be the ones to tell our story. So we're stepping up to that role to carry that forward.
What are our options for action? What can we do to optimize the success of those fish?
I've never been in a project like this where we have 20 plus different stakeholders and partners that come from all different levels of government, all different backgrounds.
We are working together, the surrounding communities around Lake Sammamish, the tribes, to raise awareness but also start actions.
It's been more than 40 years since they've been able to come up this creek. It gives us as a tribe a sense of homecoming.
I feel like we're doing kind of our small part in the whole Kokanee restoration.
I love the interface between man's environment and valuable natural resources, and how do we manage the aquatic biological world with these other very real needs? How do we make it all happen?
Their survival is our survival. And the fish friend are giving everything for the next generation.
It's easy to blame, but we are all stewards. We have to do something.
It just feels good to see people working together on something that's important, and it's a shared importance.
We all are here for the same reason. This is a marvelous place to live.
Their spawning grounds are quite literally in the backyards of the communities that we all live in. And what's neat about this project is we're not simply helping to recover a fish, we're helping to reconnect the community itself with these lands and these waters that actually define the region.
If we can get this population back to stable, that would be a huge success story. And it would show that it can be done. It can be done.
Wow, that's powerful.
Thank you.
Very powerful. also reminds us, just by watching all the watching all the visuals, how lucky we are to live in this beautiful, beautiful area. We always take advantage, we just don't respect it. We see it every day, but until you see it the way you presented it, and also within that, the creatures that live within this beautiful space and what we have to protect is just amazing. So I can't wait to see the movie.
Can't wait for you to see it.
Yeah. So let's
and many other people.
That's right. That's right. So let's kind of dig into it. That was beautiful, and so it just premiered when?
2 Saturdays ago, the 18th of January. That was at the North Bend Theater. It's very important that we did the premiere in the watershed. Near the community that really forms the nucleus of the film. So we premiered it there to a sold-out audience. And,
nice.
Great night.
Oh, that's great. So what's the plans with the film now? So you had your premiere. When's the next time someone can see it? And
so the next screening is our Seattle premiere, which we're very excited about. It's at the Intellectual House on the UW campus, which is just an incredible facility. It's fairly new there on campus. And there's plenty of speakers that will be part of that. There'll be a panel discussion. So that's February 8th. The start time of the film is 5 p.m. If you want to come early and kind of meet some of the folks who are involved with the film, and there'll be, county and state leaders and tribal leaders there. That's doors open at 3:30.
Okay.
And then beyond that, we have an Earth Day screening at UW Bothell or in that area. We're still trying to find the perfect venue.
Okay.
And we'll be looking to get it into a lot of the outdoor, movie festivals here around the lake, Marymore Park. And I'm in the process right now of submitting to film festivals, both conservation-focused film festivals as well as, larger film festivals, including SIF, which the deadline is this week. So
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
And we're looking at different options for kind of a larger distribution. My dream would be to get it on PBS nationally, because I think even though it's a local story, regional story here, the themes that it touches on are things that areas across the country are facing. Stay tuned on screenings beyond kind of the immediate ones, but we are going to be pushing this out any way we can to get it in front of eyes. Oh, and one thing I didn't mention that's been very important from the start is to get it into schools. And so, our partner at the Snoqualmie Tribe is working with 8 different elementary schools around the lake, and hopefully we can expand beyond that.
So, when did the process of this film start? So it sounds like it's almost been a labor of love for you. Maybe every project you are, but but it sounds like in the conversation we had that it was going to be one thing and it turned into something else. Kind of talk about the process that you went through on this film.
I actually, through a different project about suction dredging, which is a whole nother animal, I had worked with some of the folks involved in Kokanee recovery and learned about the subject from them. And I have an ongoing relationship with KCTS9 here and produce some smaller documentaries for them. So we thought we'd do a short little 2-minute piece about the Kokanee and their recovery. And it was kind of just barely touched the surface of what was happening. And so we finished that project, and pretty much immediately David and I and a few other folks kind of strategized, what can we do to really tell this full story. So that was summer 2016, early fall 2016. We started meeting with partners, potential funders, and the aim was to try to finish something by early 2018 or mid 2018, and after some of the low return numbers and the depth of the story and just how much sheer footage, there's a lot of stuff in that trailer that never made it into the film, because that was actually done before we finished the editing of the film. But we realized that it was going to take some time to craft the narrative in the edit room. So it was definitely a long process, and a lot of days where you show up expecting one thing and something totally different would happen, or the day would be a bust, and you'd have to reset and try to document that one piece of action the next time. And
kind of tell the anecdote. We had spoke before we started recording.
Sure.
Tell me the anecdote of, in that trailer, there's the beautiful shot in the clear creek. Tell an anecdote how hard it was to get that shot.
So with the return numbers being, as low as 20 while we're filming, obviously, being in the creek when they're coming up and spawning is really tough. I mean, we knew from some of the scientists' work that it's after really those early heavy rains that they're going to come up, but you don't know when it's going to be, and there's dedicated people walking those streams all the time during the run, and so we were just waiting, for some type of notice, sometime a cell phone call. I was starting to work with animators to kind of be able to show Kokanee through some way.
Right.
And I got the calls about 6:45 a.m. From Jim Bauer, the King County biologist featured in the film. And he just said, there's a report of several fish up here on this creek in Issaquah. Can you be here ASAP? And I just gotten this brand new GoPro that did 4K in slow motion, and didn't really have time to test it out at all. So I just jumped in the car. My cinematographer, Mark Pingree, wasn't available on such short notice, so I just thought I'd go out there and hopefully it would be the day. And we dipped the camera in there, and at the time couldn't really see what we were getting, but in the parking lot, an hour later, just watched some of these amazing shots of fish. And there's already some pretty good cinematography of them, so I had kind of a model to go after, but Jim actually shot most of that footage, and there's just a female and a male kind of dancing together in the creek, and it was just kind of special. And there's only two of us there. Usually it was a much larger group. So.
Right.
Production crew.
Yeah.
It's pretty remarkable. I mean, the timing, getting the timing right. I mean, there are times when we're trying to find fish to take to the hatchery. We can't find them.
Oh, right.
Like they're in and out of those streams so fast when they're spawning that we will, like Neil said, people will walk the creeks. Our biologists who are trained to walk these creeks and look for these fish won't find them, but they'll see the reds, the egg nests,
right,
in the gravel. Like, well, they were here, we just didn't see them. So it's remarkable to find them. And then when the flows come up, as Neil's referred to, often the water is cloudy. It's dirty. There's leaves and there's stuff floating around. So it was miraculous. Like
I agree. We talked. I said you had a clear creek and beautiful fish.
Well, people saw that and they're like, "Where's that from?" Like those are our Kokanee. That's from Laughing Jacobs Creek, and it's remarkable. It was a stroke of luck to get those.
So I had a quick question about, you said biologists are out there. So if they're out there when they're coming up and they see a male and a female doing the dance, are you guys trying to take them to the hatchery to get the eggs to protect them? Is that the plan? And then if you see the reds, is it too late? Do you not move them? What's that process like?
It's a huge learning process.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we're learning about these fish all the time. Like even like this week, we're learning new things about these fish. So it's been something that our scientist staff have worked on for, again, almost or over 2 decades. To get that process right, because you don't want to harm the fish, you don't want to change their behavior, you don't want to be killing eggs, like stepping on eggs. So they're very careful about what they do all the time. In general, what we try to do is keep most of the spawning, the eggs, in the gravel. We want most of that spawning to happen naturally.
Oh, okay.
Because the survival from the fish from the gravel is much better than the survival from the fish from the hatchery.
Oh, really?
And we don't want that artificial process. And supplementation it's a managed human intervention into that spawning process, which we're very careful about not overdoing that. So if our biologists, primarily they go out there to count fish.
Right.
And if they see situations where there are a number of fish that they feel like we could take some, then they'll come back soon after that, and then they'll net them, and they'll take them to the hatchery. So most of the spawning in most years happens naturally.
Oh, okay.
And we don't mess with those fish. If there's eggs in the gravel, we don't touch the eggs in the gravel. We don't. We don't think that's a really productive thing to do. Usually, traditionally, what our biologists have done is they've gone out and walked the streams. They see where there's a sort of a collection of fish, and they say, okay, we can take, if there's 15 fish and 8 males and 7 females, we can take 2 females and 3 males, and that'll be it. So it's a much lower number than the actual number of fish that are there. And we try to get them, again, this gets back to the timing challenge. They will come into these streams and spawn quickly. So you have to be out there before they spawn, because you don't want to take spawn fish to the hatchery because you don't get anything from those fish.
Right.
So the timing of this is just, it's so tight.
Yeah.
So they have to be out there a lot. And what we've done in the last few years, given the low numbers, we've actually, for 2 years now, we've put traps at the mouths of our three major creeks, Ebright Creek, Laughing Jacobs Creek, and Lewis Creek. And they're not operating all the time. We operate them for 6 to 8 hours, a couple times a week when the spawning return is happening, and they're monitored continuously. So it takes a little bit of the guesswork out. So our staff will go around to the traps and they'll find fish in the trap, and they'll take those to the hatchery. And they're at the bottom end of the creek, so they probably haven't spawned yet.
Okay.
And it's not as stressful as sort of chasing them in the creek and taking them that way. So it's a complicated process that we're very careful when we do.
When the group did the release this year, it was different.
It was.
They were larger fish. You released them in the lake. Talk about the change in that philosophy and process.
Yeah. So this is the learning process that I mentioned before. We're always learning. We're always adapting. We're always using the best information we have to make the right decisions about the things that we do. So what we found, as we've been running the supplementation program since 2009, our sense is that if we can hold fish, some of our fish, not all of them, we still treat different collections of fish differently within the supplementation program. Some of the fish we will raise in egg boxes on creeks, and they'll just go out when they're this big. Right away, like in March, April. They'll just go out on their own. We felt it was important to use a little bit of different strategy on some of our fish, and that was to hold them longer over the summer, where they're bigger, and then put them in the lake in October in the case that you're noting. Usually, what we had done for many years prior to that was get those fish either through those egg boxes or from the hatchery into the streams and into the lake by May. They're all out. We're not holding any fish.
Oh, okay.
The first time we held fish over the summer was last summer because we want to see how those fish will do if they're going directly into the lake, not going into the streams, and they're bigger. We have a strong sense that one of the significant causes of predation and mortality and loss of these fish is when they're young, they're coming out of the streams, and there are predators at the mouths of these streams.
Right.
There are native predators like cutthroat that will eat some of these fish, but there's also perch and bass that have been introduced, and they're in large numbers in that lake.
It's true.
And it's, so Jim Bauer calls it sort of the ring of death or something around the shoreline around the lake, where those little fish are going out, and they're prey. We're basically feeding perch if you do it wrong. So we wanted to put some bigger fish, directly into the lake in October when the lake conditions are better, when that squeeze is gone, because it ends in the early October usually. So we're trying that. All of the fish that come through our supplementation program are marked. So we'll know if we find them on the spawning grounds or we found their carcass or their heads, because it's the ear bones that we mark. We can tell if they come from the gravel or from this hatchery program.
Oh, interesting.
And if they were one of these extended rearing fish or they came from an egg box, we can tell.
Wow.
We put a lot of thought into how we do this in ways that we can learn as we go, and we're always adapting and doing better based on the information we get. So that was new. It was a great event, by the way.
It was. Actually, the gentleman directing today, he was out there. It was a beautiful night.
It was amazing.
It was perfect. Yes. So congratulations on that event. I think it went really well.
Well, and usually we would release those fish when they're this big, and we have we it's partly of an educational event when the kids they'd have
With
the little
cup.
kokanee in the cup.
Mm-hmm.
The kids love that, and we want the kids to be involved with that. But this was different because the fish are 6 inches long, and it was pretty. It was pretty cool.
Yeah,
So.
I think the mayor of Issaquah was out there and released a few as well. So
we had multiple elected officials and tribal representatives.
Yes.
It was a great.
Yes, there was a native population.
Snoqualmie tribe was there.
Yeah.
Their canoe was there.
That was really
They
impressive.
spoke. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of that, and I know we're kind of going along, but this conversation is amazing to me.
We can go. I can talk about this forever.
The connection to the different tribes, the different native tribes. Who did you connect with in the film, and their stories about this, and how important it is to their culture?
For the film, I met with a number of tribal representatives from Snoqualmie, Muckleshoot, Puyallup. Had some phone calls with Tulalip. They all know of this fish and of this story, and was able to spend at least an afternoon, sometimes a whole day with some elders at each. But the Snoqualmie tribe, really. They're the ones doing a lot of the plant restorations and scientific work as well, and they really had a vested interest in helping to tell this story. And so I early on met just an incredible young woman who's featured in the film as well. Her name is McKenna Sweet Dorman, and she's just doing a lot with the tribe. But when I first met her, she was working with she was an outreach specialist for the Department of Natural Resources at the tribe, and was telling Kokanee stories throughout the watershed, and kind of meeting with whoever she could to kind of perpetuate the story. And I think early on I was just amazed by her, and then she introduced me to elders in the tribe and her mother, Lois Sweet Dorman, whose voice is at the beginning and end of that trailer. It was just an incredible experience to listen to these stories and to sort of realize how little we as kind of settlers here know about those natural cycles, and is a really hard thing to really put in its totality in the film, because in 50 minutes, which is the running time of the film, you can barely scratch the surface again. So that was really enriching for me, and an experience I would probably never have again. Just to be so close to such just deep indigenous knowledge, and it's continuing. We're doing other work together, and
that's amazing. That's really great.
And people are really touched by that. I mean, you mentioned McKenna, and that is such an important part of the story in so many ways. I mean, in the film there's a portion of the film which everybody should go see, where we're at the
everybody go see the film.
February 8th, UW Intellectual House. Get your tickets now. There's a scene in the film where we're at a planting project on Ebright Creek on Wally Prairie's land. And one of the folks who's being interviewed is a recent immigrant.
Yes.
I think she's Chinese.
Yep, Showa from Beijing.
And she's remarking about, I just arrived here. I'm paraphrasing. I'm doing a bad job, but I just arrived here. I'm really struck by the nature around, and we have to work to protect what we have. And in that same story, you have these people that have been here for thousands of years.
Right.
And have that sort of link way back in time, and you have these new people and these people that have been here for millennia, all working together, and you have us who are sort of middling in there, arriving after that in the middle there,
right?
All working together and telling that story from way back, and telling that story today, and telling it together,
right?
Nils did a great job of sort of documenting that and weaving that narrative together. But it's really, it's such an important part of what we do and the story we tell and why people are motivated to do this. I think it's just, for me, it's one of the things that keeps me hopeful.
Yeah,
is that part of it?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's hard for people to understand the depth and the importance that the natural resources are to the native tribes in our area, because it was such a part of it is their heritage, right? Yep. And so that is a huge part of this film. Is just, to me, is just an amazing thing, and I can't wait to see it. I will be there on February 8th.
Save you a seat.
If besides supporting the film, and I just, anybody's listening, you got to go see this film. But if you're a community member, and you hear this or you learn about it and it resonates with you, how can you help? How can they add their resources to saving the Kokanee?
Right. I mean, first thing is people need to know.
Right.
So I'm glad folks are listening today, and make yourself aware of what's going on out there with Kokanee, but also in the natural environment, our natural heritage in general. Kokanee are a signal that something's not right, and we have to be doing better. So make yourself aware fundamentally, and then take action. And there's different ways that people can do that. For the folks who live in the watershed and they own land out there, be respectful of the creeks and the streams and the trees. Keep as many trees as you can. Don't use fertilizers on your lawn if you can avoid it, because that causes a degradation of conditions of water quality in the lake and the streams. Don't wash your car in your driveway. Those kind of things, which people have said forever, but they're true. I mean,
right.
Those are good things to do. Is do those things that avoid impacting the land and the water. That's
right.
fundamental. It's really important. I think it's really important for folks to talk to their elected officials about what they care about.
Right.
Make sure that they know that you're interested in your wear, and you want them to be helpful in their role as leaders in the community to help out and to use their responsibility and their authority and their resources to pitch in and do it. I think there's a premium, given the context that we're working in, for us to have creative, effective leadership in this work. There's a lot of challenges out there. It can be very discouraging. So we have a lot of smart, capable people working on this. We need more. We always need more people to be pitching in. And I think there's a premium on those kind of folks getting involved and rewarding the kind of creative work that needs to be done to manage this watershed the right way. Make yourself aware, get involved, let your leaders know. We also have partners who are very willing to have folks go volunteer on their projects. Planting projects like Snoqualmie Tribe, contact Snoqualmie Tribe, their Natural Resources Department, Trout Unlimited, who's a major supporter of this film. They do work. They do planting projects. They do the perch-a-thon out there taking fish.
Right, get rid of those predators. Get them
once or twice a year. They do that.
How was it? I wonder how successful that was this year.
Dave Kyle at Trout Unlimited, he has the records. It's pretty remarkable. For a very short window of catching these fish, they catch a lot of fish.
That's great.
But
every little bit helps, right? Every little thing, and that's a different approach. Let's do make it a fun event, like a planning event or a perch-a-thon. But all these little things add up, as well as educating and reaching out to your elected officials and all these things. And just if we just all get together and do it, maybe we move the needle a little bit every single day.
Yeah, people are motivated in different ways, and even among our group, some folks are all about we got to go fishing for these fish. Some folks are this is our history that we're protecting, and they're different. They're different motivations, and we're like, okay, we'll meet you where you are, and we're going to get the right things done. So.
Yeah.
And through the movie's website, spawninggroundsfilm.org, you can link to the other partners, and they have calendars on their pages where you can sign up for restoration, planting, perch derby, and other events that the local chapter of Trout Unlimited does. So that's kind of for right now. That's the website to go to learn about the film, and there's a partner link on there where you can link directly to the pages of all the partners.
The cities and Mid-Sound Fisheries Enhancement Group, Mountain Sound Greenway, there's lots of opportunity for folks to
That's
get their hands
wonderful.
dirty and do something important on the ground.
Well, I know we could continue all day long, but I think we've been at it for a long time. I want to thank you both for coming in today. This has been really, really informative for me. And anything else you want to plug before we go? And we're going to add some lower thirds on here and stuff like that. But if anything you want to add before we head out the door.
No, I think the next screening will be big. It's an amazing venue, and there's plenty of parking on a Saturday afternoon. And the Super Bowl isn't till the next day, so you don't have any plans. Come on and check it out. And there's a great lineup of speakers and a panel discussion afterwards. Great. So there's plenty of ways to experience beyond the film.
Right. And we sold out the house in North Bend.
Nice.
There were folks in tears watching the film.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
I know the story, and there are points where I'm sort of getting choked up because I'm like, wow, this means so much to so many people in so many different ways. I mean, Nils has done a great job with this film, capturing that.
Well, if the trailer is any clue to what is to come, I can't wait to see it myself. Once again, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks,
everybody, for listening and watching. And remember, everyone, stay unique.